Hey, how you doing? Justin here, and man, have I got a fun lesson for you. There is so much cool stuff in this lesson, like cool new things to explore, great things that are going to really improve your musicianship. It's a really, really cool thing. The basic idea is that if you're doing a duet with somebody, you've got two guitar players, you're going to play together, that one person is going to play the melody of the song and the other person is going to play the chords. Now, I'm kind of assuming that you know the chords and you're hip with that part, so it's mostly the melody part that we're going to be talking about today. And a really interesting thing about the melodies is that you don't usually find them in tab. If you go to the popular tab sites, you're not usually going to find the melody of the song written out in tab. You might find it in like a chord lyric book, like if you go to a local music store and you have a look at the sheet music for a particular band, you'll often see the melody line written out in traditional notation with the lyrics underneath it and the chords up above. But for most of you, assuming that most people aren't reading standard notation at this point, so how on earth are you going to learn to play the melody if you can't read the music and there's no tab available? You gotta listen. So working out melodies on your own can be a little bit challenging, but if you start right and you start easy, it's actually nowhere near as hard as you might expect. The first thing though you got to get hit with is listening. You got to listen carefully to the melody of the song, not just like have the music on in the background. You really want to pay attention to the melody, where the melody notes are going up, where the notes are going down. Ideally, you want to really try and get the melody of the song that you want to learn into your musical imagination, in your musical mind, so that you can hear it without the music being on. So you can kind of imagine what that melody sounds like. Particularly in these first few attempts, I'd recommend that you find a song that you're really familiar with. Maybe one that you've known for some time, that you've just kind of got. All of us have those songs where we've heard them enough times that we can just kind of close our eyes and imagine. We can kind of hear the music in our head. That's really where you want to get to before you start trying to transcribe the melody, at least in the initial stages. Before you start working out the melody to a particular song, I would strongly recommend that you have checked out the chords first of all. And that's because 8 out of 10 times, the melody note is going to be contained within the chord. Also, did you know that 98.65% of statistics are made up on the spot, just incidentally? Now, as well as knowing the chords for finding the chord tones, it's also useful if you know the key. If you know the chords in the key, then it's very easy to figure out what key you're in, and therefore the major scale where the rest of the melody notes are likely to be found. If you're not sure about chords in the key, you might want to go and check out the music theory course over on my website. One of the questions I often get asked when I first start teaching someone this is where you find the first note. Do you look in the open position or do you play further up the neck? Now, most times, for most easy, simple beginner songs, I'd recommend that you start in the open position. It's just a little bit easier. It doesn't involve memorizing scale patterns. As you get better and you get more familiar with major scale patterns, of which there are 5, you'll start to be able to find the melodies within the scale patterns, which does actually make things a little easier, because once you know the key that you're in and you know the scale pattern, you know the most likely notes that you're going to find in a melody. Sometimes notes are used outside of the scale, but that is a lot less common. So knowing the scale shape is helpful later on. At these early stages, I'd recommend that you start in open position. If you're transcribing a vocal that gets pretty high, particularly stuff that like a girl singer like Stevie Nicks singing up in the upper register, you're going to have to move up the neck on the thinner string, so you might find it easier to have a go at playing the melody all in what we call a closed position, that is without open strings. But failing that, if you don't have to go there, I'd recommend starting in open position. Finding the starting note of a melody is a pretty big deal. You'll usually find the rest of the melody fairly easy to work out once you've got a confident starting point. So you might find it takes a little bit of time for you to find that starting note. There's a few different ways to do it. Most commonly, I think singing it can really help. If you've got your chord and you go the melodies la boo da la 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 la, it's probably going to be a chord tone. So if you know that first chord and you've gone la as your melody, it might be la. So you know there it's a G. So trying to find that starting note, really, really big deal. It's something I'm going to give you as to help you get going with this. I'm going to give you some suggested songs to work out the melodies for and the starting note. A couple of little hints maybe as well on each different tune, just to kind of get you going. I do think that it's one of these skills that the initial starting point can seem like, getting going with it. It's a bit like, oh, this is really hard. But once you get into the flow, it's like, yeah, I can do this. You get a bit of confidence. It does become a lot easier. Some of it is the fear of not being able to do it. When you realize that you can do it, the whole thing becomes quite a lot easier. One tip that I'll give you, particularly useful when you're starting out, is to write the melody down in tab. You don't need to worry about writing like traditional notation or the rhythm or anything like that, but just tabbing out the melody as you figure it out can be really helpful. Ideally, you do want to memorize it, right? Leaving things on the page, not such a good idea. So you want to try and commit that melody into your memory and get that connection between the sound of the melody and your fingers really nice and strong. But in the early stages, when you're working out melodies for the first time, don't feel like it's a bad idea to write it down in tab. I think it's a really, really good idea, and it'll speed things up considerably. I'm going to give you some specific songs that I think are going to be good ones to start off with, and some that have got some challenges, and I'll explain what those challenges are, so you're kind of a bit, forewarned is forearmed and all of that. But a couple of things that you might want to consider when you're choosing your own songs. The first thing that can make a song difficult is the range of the song. So if it's really, really high, because you're not going to be able to play in open position, you might find that a little trickier. So maybe trying to find songs that aren't like Mariah Carey high, really high things. Really low can be a bit sticky as well if you're going for Leonard Cohen and that kind of thing, but generally that's a bit easier than going for really high. So just be aware of the range. Probably even more tricky than being high up is large jumps in the melody. If it's going la, la, it's going really big jumps in the melody, it's going to be difficult to work out. You want anything more than a couple of tone steps, like 4 frets or anything, any jumps bigger than that is going to be a little bit difficult. So of course, if you're just listening the first time, you're not going to know exactly how far it is. But if the melody is jumping around a lot from low notes to high notes, that might be one to save for a later date. And the last thing that can make things tricky is embellishments. Now, singers very often, as well as adding vibrato, they do la, la. They'll do this kind of movement from one note to another note very specifically in a particular way. A lot of R&B songs do it. They get really, really fancy. I'm not even going to attempt to display that in vocals because I definitely can't do that. But even songs like, I know Wish You Were Here is one where a lot of beginners think, oh, it's a nice, easy song. And it kind of is, but there's quite a few lines within the song where it's la, or within the one phrase, the one word. And that can be a little bit tricky to work out. Not impossible, and that is a good song to have a bit of a go at, but just be aware that if there's loads of vocal embellishments, that can make it a lot harder to work out as well. I want to mention that you might want to avoid, at least in the early stages, is modern pop music where there's a lot of emphasis on the rhythm. A lot of guys like Ed Sheeran have these kind of melodies where it's going it's difficult when the melody is one note and there's a lot of rhythm. It's possible, but it's a lot trickier when you're starting out. Oftentimes when you've got that kind of rhythmic melody, it's a bit more spoken or rapped instead of sung. So as well, it can be difficult to work out exactly what the pitch is when you're working that out. So maybe just avoid that for now. Save it for later. Now, before we get into some specific song examples that I'd like you to have a try at, I want to talk about 3 awesome bonuses that you get when you practice this. And the first one is that you'll gain a lot of confidence when you're singing. A lot of people, when they're trying to sing, if they're not sure of the melody, is where it gets a bit out of tune. They'll be fine along here, singing along, and it goes to this bit, I'm not sure where it... because they're not confident they know how the melody goes. And when you've learnt to play the melody on guitar or piano, any instrument, you become certain of it because you've had to play it. You've had to choose a melody note. Often with singing, people kind of fall in the cracks and they're singing between 2 pitches instead of being right on a pitch. So it really can be a complete game changer. I've seen students really struggling with singing, learn to play the melody on the instrument and then be able to sing it perfectly straight away. But it's just because they were uncertain about what exactly they were supposed to be singing. So it's not the point of the lesson. The point of the lesson is to be able to play with somebody else, to have a jam, to be able to do a duet with somebody where one person's playing chords, one person's playing the melody. But there's these other bonuses that are really super strong. The second bonus that you get when you've learned to play the melody of a song is it becomes possible to work on a chord melody arrangement. That is, playing the chords and the melody at the same time on one instrument. I did an example of that as part of this course for Greensleeves, but I've got some other lessons on other songs yesterday, and House of Rising Sun and a few other tunes where you can learn to combine the melody and the chords together. It's a real fun thing. It's not super easy, but if you're not able to work out the melody on your own, you'll find working it into a chord melody arrangement impossible. So it's a real good starter for that. And the last thing, which is actually maybe even one of the biggest ones, is that if you've learned to work out a melody of a song by ear, you'll also find you're able to work out solos and lead lines as well. And because you've got used to doing it from a melody, you won't be just restricted to learning guitar lines. You'd be able to learn Neil Young's harmonica solo in Heart of Gold, because you're used to hearing da 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 da. You've heard the melody. It wasn't a guitar thing. You just got used to hearing a melody and learning how to find it on guitar. So a little bit of work on this kind of simple melody, working it out on your own on the guitar and writing it down, will lead you to being able to work out full-on solos on your own, and that is a really super cool bonus. Okay, let's start off with Let It Be. Start when I found E to a G, that's the second fret on the fourth string, and G. I found myself in times of trouble. Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. If we look at it in relation to the chords now, so okay, this first part is all based around a C chord. I'll find myself in, then it's going to a G. Times of trouble, A minor. Okay. Now we've got an F, it's an F6 to an F. You can see so many of the notes are found in the chords. Does make a nice chord melody, that one, but hopefully you're just seeing that I can play with just relatively simple chords and a few other notes. See there that most of the melody notes are found within the chords. To start off, to learn that, I found, that's the E to the G, the fourth fret on the fourth string to the open G. Let's have a look at the House of the Rising Sun. There is a house. It should be enough for you to get going with. There is a house, second fret on the fourth string to the third string, then open, and first fret on the second string. We put it just with the chords now, so if you're feeling confident that you can have a go, just stop the video now and go and have a workout of that song. If you want a little bit more, to the C, D, F, A minor, C, E. So on. Hallelujah, another great one. Heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. Now you don't really care for music, do you? Okay, it's the Leonard Cohen version. See, these chords, heard there was a secret chord, G to A. Now see if you can work out the rest of it on your own. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. See if you can work out the rest of it from there. E, A, G, A, second fret, open third string, second fret, ain't no sunshine with. Okay, that's a really nice one because you can play that melody and then you have the chords. It's a darkness every day. Works really nicely as a duet, that one. Three Little Birds. Don't worry about a thing. 'Cause every little thing gonna be alright. It's getting a little bit high. Okay. Second fret on the second string, fourth fret or open second string if you want, and then the note A, which is the second fret on the third string. Don't worry about a thing. That's enough. See if you can get it together. Breakfast at Tiffany's. You say we got nothing in common. No common ground to start from. So it's starting on an A. You say we got nothing in common. Fourth fret on the third string and fourth fret on the fourth string. Now, Breakfast at Tiffany's is a really nice little one for a couple of reasons. One, it works really nicely in pattern 3 of the major scale. So it's in the key of D. If you know that pattern of the major scale, not only does the melody fit really nicely in that, but so do the lead guitar lines. So if you're feeling a bit adventurous and you're finding this relatively easy, you might want to have a go at listening to the those little melody parts as well, because they're really nice to play and it's a good exercise for transcribing. Okay, just a couple more. Good one, Coldplay, Yellow. Okay, starting off with C sharp and D sharp. That's second fret and fourth fret on the second string. Look at the stars, look how they shine for you. Okay, see if you can figure out the rest of that melody. That's a really lovely one to play along with for sure. Wish You Were Here. The very beginning, so, is one of those ones where it's straight away, it's not just a straight melody on the one syllable. So, C, B, G, so you think you can tell. Okay, see if you can start off with that. So 5, 4, open, so you think you can tell. 5, 4, 5, 4, open, second fret. I mean, Wish You Were Here is such a lovely tune, and that's one of those ones where it's going to come up time and time again as a song that you might play in a jam session where someone's learned the riff and they've learned all the fancy parts and they've played the solo. If nobody wants to sing it and you can play the melody, it really makes the song make sense. It'll encourage people to sing along as well. And as another kind of extra bonus point that you get there is if you want to improvise the solo, a great place to start is the melody of the song. Rather than it just being a random collection of licks, if you start by playing the melody but just twisting the melody a bit so it's not exactly the same as the melody but it kind of starts like it is and then adventures off into other places, that's a really strong way of starting a solo. Okay, I want to finish off with a few more advanced techniques that you might want to explore as you get better at doing this. Wouldn't be looking at this at the beginning. So if this is your first week at working out melodies on your own, don't be going here, right? This is for things to think about later on down the line. The first one is things like slides, embellishments, sliding up to a note. I think it can be really, really tasteful. It just seems to make the melody sound a lot more vocal if you find an appropriate place, and don't try and do it too much, but if you find an appropriate place to slide up to a note. Oftentimes you'll find things like instead of playing the open E, instead of going, it'll sound nicer to go and slide up, because it's the same note, but instead just having a little slide in there just makes it sound so much nicer and so much more vocal, because that's what you're kind of trying to do now. You're trying to make your guitar sound like a voice. So watch out for places where slides might work really well. Second tip is paying attention to how long notes are held for. Now, this is the kind of thing bass players automatically pay attention to this, but for singers, when you're copying a singer, how long a note is held for has a big impact on the melody, and it might not be something you're used to listening for. So just try and stay aware. Is the note sung very short and just finishes? Is it held? Leads on to vibrato, which we'll talk about in a second. But just starting to pay attention to note lengths will have a real big influence on how well you play a particular melody. I just touched on it there, but vibrato as well. Putting vibrato in appropriate places, which definitely doesn't mean on every note. Even if you could, you shouldn't. And being aware that vocal vibrato can be a bit different to guitar vibrato. Often, like particularly rock guitar vibrato is very intense straight away, whereas with singing it tends to go like la. So it starts just a little bit and then gradually gets wider. So you might want to think about trying to emulate that and spending a bit of time working on your vibrato as well, if you're going to go there. Another really nice trick is to be able to lift a melody up an octave in the second verse. So what I mean by that is if you've played the melody down really low, when you go through it, you're probably going to play a verse 1, then a chorus, and then when you come to that next verse, it might be verse 1, verse 2, then chorus. But after that first chorus, if you can play the melody 1 octave higher, then it'll sound really cool. It just changes, it makes the song a little bit more dynamic. So if we're doing, and I haven't rehearsed this, so it might go wrong, but if we're doing the House of Rising Sun. Okay, we've got this melody. If you know the notes, you can do it by thinking, well, it's an E to an A, B, C, in which case you go. So that idea of being able to take it up that melody really gives it a lift, it gives it a dynamic. If you're working it out, if you're new to this sort of thing, like I was just kind of what I'd call blagging that, kind of guessing it as I go. I've done this a little bit, so I'm reasonable at it. But if you're new to it, then write it down. Work out how to play it that higher octave if it's something that you think you might use, because it does sound really cool. And the last thing, which I just touched on there, is hearing your way around. So I can very often play most of a melody of a song just if I can imagine how the melody goes in my head. If it's in my ears, I can try and translate it out. It doesn't always work, and if the melody's complicated, I'll stumble over. I definitely flounder around when I'm trying to do jazz versions of that. But for simple pop music, I can generally hear the melody and find how to make that melody come out on the guitar. And that is where we get into what I consider to be proper expression. If I'm expressing an idea that I can hear in my musical imagination and take it out of the guitar, that feels like I'm truly expressing myself. And that's a pretty cool thing to get in your bag. And the easiest way to learn to do that is exactly what we're doing here. Hearing a melody, seeing if you can figure out how to play it on the guitar, and practicing it so you build up this relationship between your musical imagination and your hand, which hopefully will flow more and more the further you get along with it. Now, if you find this a struggle at the beginning, you wouldn't be alone. Most people find this pretty challenging when they start, but it is one of those ones where you just have to get over that initial hurdle of it being difficult. Like most transcribing things, it does take that little bit of effort at the beginning. You'll also be pleased to know that this covers a few items on your practice routine. Practicing a specific example can be part of your repertoire, but the actual learning of the melody, for me, would go under transcribing, which if you're following my practice routines will be a 10-minute a day or a 1 hour a week kind of a thing. It really is a powerful thing to be practicing. It will accelerate your musicianship like nothing else. All of the great guitar players that we all know and love learned by transcribing. That's how Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix, all those people learned. They didn't use tabs or, using a website to show them how to play it or a video lesson or anything else. I'm not trying to do myself out of a job, but the transcribing thing is really where it's at. Developing your musical imagination and being able to express yourself are really powerful things. On a easy level, you can work out a way to play with another guitar player, so you can have a jam. One person plays the melody, one person plays the chords. It sounds great. So that's already a good reason. But there's all of this other stuff that you get out of the process as well. So if I could encourage you to add one thing regularly to your practice routine, it would be finding melodies by ear. I'll give you as many hints as you want. If you get through all of the songs that I've done already and you're like, man, I want some more, but I'm still struggling with the first notes, let me know on the website and I'll find some more, pop down the first notes. Or if you're community minded and you've figured out a bunch of songs and you've figured out the first notes, maybe you could leave them in the comments on the website. It's best. You could do it on YouTube as well, but the website is more rounded approach here, because we know that everyone on the website is actually dedicated into learning guitar and not into getting distracted, but that's a whole nother story. I won't go there right now. I really hope you enjoy this, and I hope you're enjoying the rest of this module. Do remember that grade 3 is cooking up really well over on the website. If you haven't been over there, there's loads of support materials as well, like tab pages that you can print out and download to write down your melodies for this, and plenty of other stuff as well. Hope you're having a fantastic day and you enjoyed this. I'll see you for plenty more very soon. Bye bye.